So if you're in real estate and you're listening to this podcast or watching it and thinking, man, I need some more Leigh Brown answers in my life. Well, guess what, friends? I have a new program that is launching right now called Answers.Real-Estate, where I will give you every bit of insight I have to help you grow your real estate business, help you better respond to consumers, to provide a more excellent real estate experience so that the next time you land on crazy shit in real estate, you'll have a better solution to whatever you ran into. Answers.Real-Estate. There are monthly plans available. You will love it. Get your coaching. Sign up with me today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now. We talk about real estate matters that matter to you. We are live here from Linda Craft Team Studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, part of the Greater Research Triangle Park. And today's show is a special one, I have to tell you, because my guest today is Leigh Brown. Many of you know her already. I know you do because you follow real estate. You probably know who she is. She's been around. She's millions of views all over the place. I'm telling you. Also, former 2023 past president, North Carolina Association of Realtors. Former past president, right? Do I have this right? Of the certified residential specialist?
Yes, back when it was the certified residential specialist before it changed name. I was the last president.
You were the last president.
CRS.
Yeah, that author, keynote speaker, by the way, fabulous keynote speaker. Absolutely. Real estate professional down in Cabarrus County, North Carolina. If you've never been to go there, UNC graduate, right?
Go Heels.
So she's a Tar Heel as well. And she's absolutely outstanding. And what she's going to help us do today, she's going to help us sort through some of the issues that we have, or I shouldn't say issues, how we're going to conduct real estate post-NAR settlement.
Post this NAR settlement.
Yeah, well,
because there's more
coming. There's more coming. There's more coming for sure. And here's the thing that I find interesting. I think the general public is not paying as much attention to it. And as real estate professionals, of course, we're all over this, right? But it's going to affect you as a consumer. And already in North Carolina, you know this, I don't have to tell you this, but I started looking through all the changes that we have to our different forms, buyer and seller. So help us sort through this. What's really happening? Help the consumer understand what's really happening here.
Well, how deep do you want to go into this? Because what's happening is an attack on entrepreneurs and an attack on property rights, an attack on home ownership. This is a big picture situation. Where it's drilling out right now, though, is that consumers are going to have their experiences change. And it's not all bad, because sometimes change just makes us better. Linda and I know that. We've been in this business long enough to know that changes in the market are just changes in the market. We just have to explain things better. And in North Carolina, we've been doing things in the vein that the Department of Justice says they want since the 90s. The biggest change the consumer is going to experience, and this is going to tick a lot of people off. Before you can walk into a house to view it, you're going to have to sign an agency agreement. And I just don't think a lot of consumers are going to like that, because part of the viewing of a home process is a dating process with the agent. Do I like you? Do I trust you? When you walk into this house, do you proactively point out material defects? It's required by law. But some agents are proactive and some are reactive, and some, frankly, are less educated than others. But for the consumer to walk in that door, you and I both know there's a lot of home buyers out there that are thinking, but this is the one house I want. I don't care. I'll sign anything. I want this one house. They've been driving by it forever. They're in love. They sign whatever. Then they walk in and say, maybe I liked it more online than I thought I would. Those photos were really good. And they don't want it. But they just signed this document. And if they didn't read it, and people don't read, you're going to have to read. It may say they have agreed to work with that agent for 6 months. And now you're going to be held hostage by a piece of paper for an agent that you didn't meet until you walked in this home. And I think that's where the practice is going to cause some heartburn for consumers. Because to your point, the regular public is not paying attention to this. I look at this as pregnancy. And obviously, I'm much older than people that are pregnant right now, but I was pregnant 2 times and my children are now college age. But when I was pregnant, everywhere I looked, I saw pregnant people. And we do it with cars too.
Yep.
You're buying a new Prius. Every car down the road is a Prius.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize there were this many. So in real estate, we are tuned into real estate all the time. With the general public, they only tune into real estate when they want to buy a house or sell a house or when life changes. The stat that I saw 2 weeks ago was actually from the CEO of Next Home, James Dwiggins, and he might be one of the smartest people we have in real estate. And he mentioned that on some research and some data points, only 25% of the public is even aware that anything's changing around real estate because they're in their home. And I feel Raleigh's probably similar to Charlotte at this point, where people are staying in their homes over 10 years now on average, and they used to move more frequently, but it's very hard to buy what you want when the markets have changed price points and there's no inventory, the same things that have been plaguing us. So you're watching this for whatever reason, probably because you're interested in real estate. So you're aware, but your friends and neighbors from work and at church and down the street, they're not paying attention, which means that when they go to view a house and now suddenly it's, you have to sign this to walk in the door, I think the consumer is going to bristle up and say, oh, I am not doing it. Where I do hope realtors are smart enough to say, we didn't make this rule. This didn't come from the realtors. This came from the DOJ. This is a requirement that the Biden DOJ put in place. And the consumer needs to know that. It's just a fact. And it should irritate you, because I didn't marry my husband before the first date. We dated. We got to know each other. And it's worked out for over 20 years. I worry about the consumer. The other thing that's going to change is how commissions work. And this is something that a lot of good agents have been explaining for years. Some agents, though, maybe didn't explain it well, or they got lazy in their explainers. And that happens when you have a system that works really well. And our system has been very efficient, very fair to the consumer, very fair to sellers, and whoever you picked as an agent. There weren't boycotts in the market. There wasn't discrimination taking place. Now, the buyer, when you pick your agent may be able to get the fee that you guys agree on covered by the seller, but you may have to pay them out of pocket. And some of y'all will be okay with that. What cracks me up, though, Jay, is they keep talking about this like, oh, no, buyers suddenly have to pay their agent. It's not suddenly. It was baked in previously. So now they're unbaking the cake, or because I watch cooking competition shows, they're deconstructing. So we're deconstructing how it has worked and taking it out. And now it might go back in and it might not. What that's going to mean to a home buyer is, how articulate is your agent at explaining this to you? And how willing are they to help you figure out many, many options? Because if there's anything the American consumer likes, it's options.
And we're lacking those. I feel like we've limited those now for the consumer. So let's talk about this from a buyer's side a little bit more in depth, because I think there's a little trouble with the buyer side of all this, right? We've already seen they've relaxed the rules for VA, right?
Temporarily. Make sure you notice that was a temporary lifting of the rule.
Okay. Well, explain why that's so important, the temporary piece. Yeah, explain why that's so important.
Well, I should be very upfront with you. I don't trust the bureaucrats in the federal government. And I might be the only one, but if you're out there and you agree with me, you should hit the comments right now and say, Leigh Brown, you're not alone. The reality is, whenever a rule is temporarily lifted, we know that if the bureaucrats in charge change, the rule can either be permanently put in place or it can be removed. And we're in an election year that is very spiny already, and it's going to get worse. I literally watching Chopped on my Hulu, and I have ads for the presidency, and I'm thinking, stop, just please don't do this. It's going to be every 2 seconds. So I know that if we have a change in administration for the next year, that rule might become permanent. The temporary lifting might happen. And if we have the same administration in place, again, might make it permanent, might take off the temporary status, which means our veterans right now are okay, but there's no guarantee. And that drives me crazy that the consumer can't count on basic rules around loan types when they're making the biggest financial transaction happen that most people will ever do. And it's also a wildly emotional transaction.
Huge.
I don't know that people have really thought their way through that. Realtors see it every day. The tears on our shoulders, the way that we get just cussed out because the emotion is so high.
Yeah.
And then they call us back and apologize for cussing us out because that's just part of the process. But when you're buying and selling a house, I mean, your life is in fast forward, but it's also on hold at the same time. So if the rules on the backside of your loan are also in flux, how can you focus?
Right.
And you really do want to focus because you're buying this house, you're going to stay in it 10, 15 years.
Right.
Are your kids going to enjoy the yard?
Right.
Are you going to be able to get to the grocery store that you prefer? How does the parking work? Can you age successfully in this house? The things that people think through. It's so much more than, oh, look how shiny this kitchen is.
Right.
But we in real estate have turned a lot of our house conversations into, look at this shiny kitchen instead of, hey, our buyer is 58 years old.
Right.
10 years from now, they're going to be questioning, how do you get to the back of that cupboard? Does it have pullouts?
Right.
So realtors have to start tapping into the emotion of this so that we can change the whole narrative around how buyers operate and what matters to them.
And now let's move to first-time home buyers, because I think this is really, I mean, they're already under a lot of pressure right now. First of all,
Expensive.
Low inventory has created an expense, right? So it's hard for them to get in. When I first got into real estate in 1997, it was like a whole, right? I mean, it was much easier.
Don't you wish you'd bought more houses back then, though, Jay?
I'm going to shut up and say yes. but right. So, and of course, Linda's been in it since 85. When interest rates were like 16 to 18%, right? When she was selling real estate.
Right before the S&L crisis.
Yeah, right before that. So,
she was 10, by the way, if y'all wondered. She was just a baby. They gave away licenses early.
But anyway, now there's so much pressure on our first-time home buyer that it's very difficult for them to get in the market. Now with what we're proposing as a result of this settlement, they don't already have very much money.
Right.
A lot of them don't have very much money going in. And there could be an expectation that they may have to pay an agent. Well, how do we walk around that?
Well, the DOJ has stated they don't think buyers need agents. One of their stated goals, and for those of y'all that think I'm a conspiracy theorist, just read what they're putting out there. They don't think the buyer agent is necessary. They think the buyer can just do this on their own. I disagree with that because I remember being a first-time buyer. Now, luckily, my dad was my realtor and I was already a realtor, but it was so much, just so much.
Right.
And for our first-time buyers, you can go it alone. You've always been able to go it alone. So let's be very clear. That's not changing, that you could have gone it alone. But then you start thinking, how do I time this? How do I pick a house? What do I pay for a house? When does the moving happen? Where do I get deposits? What do I do for inspection? What if I find mold? Is there a survey necessary? And you start thinking about the cascading effect of what people want to know. The agent is the one who says, all right, here's step one, here's step two, here's what came up on step one, here's what comes up on step two. They're continually working through the process. The first thing I want you to understand, especially if you're a first-time buyer who watches this episode, you'll want an agent. You don't need one in the eyes of the government, but we'll just tell you that we simplify the process by explaining it. When you go it alone, it's hard to get any explanation for your big questions. So when you start thinking through why you want one, that's step one. And so step two is, should I even buy right now? Yeah, well, I want you to go understand, yes, you should buy, because I was just poking at Jay. I would say the same thing to Linda in 85. I can go back into all of my past history, and I wish I'd bought more houses all along. Buying a house is still a great decision because you're going to be in it for a long time. This is not a pocketbook that you're going to get tired of next year. This is not a car that's going to get worn down. This is a long-term investment. This is 10, 15, 20 years. And if I have my way, whatever you buy now, you'll never sell it. You'll keep it as a rental property one day and you'll build a little real estate empire. So now, as we think about the why you want to buy a house, I will tell you right now, markets don't always go up. They go through cycles. They go up, they go down, they go sideways. We don't know what's going to happen next in the real estate market. But if you look at any market over a 20-year or 30-year window, in all markets, it's gone up over the long time frame. So just make sure you're thinking about real estate in that long-term perspective. So now that you're thinking, I do want to buy, I want to figure this out, even if it feels expensive today, it's not as expensive as it's going to feel 10 and 20 years from now. So I'm going to buy, I think I want to have an agent. So to Jay's point, you're going to have to pay that agent. Now, in the past, like I said, it was baked into the cake. Your agent got compensated through the transaction. The DOJ and these lawsuits are stating that that's not going to be allowed. So you're thinking, well, all right, what do I do? Well, you'll find 1 million agents with 1 million business models. That also hasn't changed. It's been like that forever. And I mean, Linda and I know this. It's been hilarious to watch the headlines of this is what agents have always charged. And we're thinking this is absolutely silly because every market has always had somebody doing it differently. So as a buyer, you might pick somebody who just unlocks doors for you and doesn't provide any counsel. That's probably going to be a less expensive option. All right. So maybe you think you're a super educated buyer. You don't need anybody extra. Great. That model exists. Maybe you're the person who needs your hand held and you want a real concierge service. That's going to cost you more. Well, what do? Step one is when you're talking to that agent, find out what they provide so that you know what you're paying for. That's very important. Then you're going to think about the amount that you agreed to pay that agent. How do we handle it? Some loan programs will allow you to bake that into your sale price so you don't have to come up with the cash. And the example I'll give is if the house price is $100,000 before you ask, no, it doesn't exist right now. But if I'm using round numbers, if the house is $100,000 and your agent and you have agreed that the fee is $25,000, well, then your lender might have a program that says, great, the loan will be for $125 to cover the fee. These are all made up numbers, but the most important thing you have to know is what your lender is going to allow. So it's very important that you have a great locally based mortgage lender who can say, yes, we have a program for that, or no, we don't. I think that's one of the rules that we will see relaxed because currently there are not many loan types that allow you to finance your commission because it's not an asset that can be foreclosed on. If you wondered why, if you don't make your mortgage payment, the bank can take the house, but they can't get that commission back out of that agent's pocket. So you're going to see a lot of changing and negotiating there. But that's one option. The other option is that you and your agent can say this $25,000 that we negotiated, we're going to ask the seller to cover that for me. And so that's going to be a conversation your agent has with the seller's agent to see what they will and won't say yes to. That's going to be an option. The other option that you're going to hear talked about, and the media keeps pushing this one forward. So full disclosure, I don't believe this is a good option for many people. You're being told the buyer can just go to the seller of the house, can just go to the agent for the seller and go around having an agent at all because you can just use the agent for the seller. So understand something. Using the agent for the seller is like not having an agent at all because that agent works for the seller. North Carolina and many other states allow dual agency, which is one agent working for both parties. I personally think that should be outlawed because that is one agent who has declared a fiduciary obligation to the seller and a fiduciary obligation to the buyer. So now ask yourself, if they've declared an obligation to both parties, how in the world do you do the best thing for both parties? Now, there are agents that have a high level of integrity. They manage both sides, but then they're not negotiating, you're managing. So if that agent is managing for you and you're okay with that and it's been fully disclosed, it's a path you can go down. But I know that in my experience working for buyers, they want somebody in their corner to help them navigate. And a person who is mediating is not going to be able to navigate unless they do the same thing for both sides. And it's just very fraught with legal liability and risk to everyone and the agent that you talk to. So if you see that perfect house and you call the sign in the yard, the first thing out of their mouth should be, I work for the seller. So if you come over here, I've already got a client. Then you are going in there with full informed consent, which is a different thing than you will find with some agents in the marketplace who just want you to come in the door. So the reason you might think that's better is, well, if I don't have an agent, I don't have to pay one. But I'll give you an example. This happened in my office this week, right in Concord. got a call from somebody who wanted to sell their condo. Great. That's fantastic. They had called my office 3 years ago to buy that condo, but then they didn't use us because they worked out a deal with the seller on their own with no agent. You already know where this is going. Great, great, great. What'd you pay for it? All right. They paid $347 for it. Great. Pulled up the comps. That was 3 years ago. So understand that was 2021 when the market was on fire.
Right. Yeah.
22 still on fire. 23 still on fire. We have continued to go up since 21. The top of the range for that property right now, the top, because whenever we price a house, there's a low side, a high side. It's not an exact science. And part of our job is to help you understand it's not an exact science. We're going to get as close as we can.
Right.
Jay, the top of the range for that condo right now is $350. There was never a comp at $347. And we were just feeling really sick on behalf of this person because now we, the agents, have to tell this person, you got totally bamboozled 3 years ago by a seller who saw a sucker coming. There was no agent involved on the seller side to reel them in, no agent on the buyer side to say, hold it up here. So now that person is either going to take a loss or sit on that condo.
Yes.
And that's the decision they have to make. It's not our job to make it, but we were sitting there slack-jawed. And finally the consumer said, oh, that was why I needed an agent. And we could just say, because that's one of our jobs is to run the scenario for you, the buyer, just like we do for the seller. When we're pricing a house, we're going to give you a scenario and say, it looks like it's worth ish. So if you want to go higher than ish, because you want it that bad, we'll help you. But again, full informed disclosure didn't happen for this person. And I hate it for them because I can't go back and change it.
Well, and this is just one of a number of problems, right? That when you don't have representation, right? But by the way, we've always had this issue with new homes.
Oh yes, because the builders have to get the comps up.
So we've always had an issue there. But then explain to the average consumer due diligence.
That's very hard to explain, especially for those of y'all that are coming into this market. Raleigh is a relocation market.
Right.
We have state government, you got the universities, you got technology, biochemistry, pharmaceuticals, everybody's coming to Raleigh.
Right.
Well, Apple now, they're all coming from outside. If you come from a state that's not North Carolina, you're going to be a little bit slack-jawed at how due diligence works because as a buyer of a house, you're making a non-refundable deposit to the seller in their name on that check or Venmo if you're a young person. And they're going to go deposit this right away. And that money is gone. Buy the house, don't buy the house. If you buy it, you'll get a credit. But if you don't buy the house, it's gone. I see it as a good thing because that means as a buyer, if you hit that moment of, I can't. Whether it's related to the finances or related to your job, or maybe you just decided not to move here, you can get out without a big legal fight. It lets you get out for any reason at all, as long as you're within your time frames. But for most buyers, they say, but I don't understand why the seller gets my money. What you're paying for is for that seller to take it off the market. You're buying time to decide if you want to buy it. In other states, you're not giving the seller anything for that. So this was a correction that our contract paperwork, our forms brought in, because previously sellers were getting hung out to dry. Buyer pulls up stakes right before closing, and then they're fighting over the deposit money. And as a seller, you've now got 30 days accumulated on market, which makes you look like an undesirable house because the longer it takes your house to sell, the more buyers say, must be something wrong. Well, it could just be the buyer flipped out and didn't want to buy it and nothing to do with the house. But sellers were left holding the bag. And so now if you're the seller who loses your buyer for whatever reason, at least you got a little bit of compensation to account for that time off market. It's hard to accept. So now let's think about this. You're buying a house and you've got to come up with your down payment. So let's just say you're a 5% down payment. That's a really good down payment for some people because that puts you in conventional territory. Okay, now you have to take part of that down payment and give it to the seller because you probably maxed out your savings at your 5%. Part of that is your deposit but it's non-refundable. So we just suggest that you understand the gravity of your decisions. And that's what a lot of this comes down to, is that we can't treat real estate like a lighthearted thing. We have to treat it more seriously because there's so many very intense factors going in.
Right.
And if you decide not to buy that house and you gave them $5,000 non-refundable, which is not unreasonable because it depends on the price point and how much you give the seller.
Right.
But let's say you forked over $5,000 and now you don't want the house, you can't buy the house, or worse, there's some undisclosed inspection problem. There's mold in the crawl space, or there's a fence that's on the neighbor's property and you've got a seller that won't do anything. So you're thinking, I'm going to buy this and inherit $25,000 in trouble, or I'm going to walk away and lose my $5,000. That's what you're faced with, is how much is that money worth to you? Well, if you walk away and lose your $5,000, for some of our buyers, that means they now have to put their home buying on hold while they replenish their savings, which is typically your first timer.
Right.
And back to my previous point, the longer you wait to buy, the more expensive it gets. And so every time you get a step back, your dream house got more expensive. And we didn't cause that problem, by the way. I just want to point out here, another thing you're seeing that's being said in the political arena is that realtors caused the affordability crisis. Let me just be very clear about that. We had nothing to do with the affordability crisis. It is a supply and demand situation. We have a low level of supply and a high level of demand. The realtor's professional fee didn't change those games. If anything, we've helped calm down people who wanted to overbid, because we said, look, be smart here. And we've helped sellers be reasonable, knowing there were other factors involved. So if you're thinking this is very confusing and very involved, it is. And that's another reason that you definitely want a skilled realtor in your corner, because we eat, sleep, drink, and breathe this stuff because we want you to have the best outcome.
Right.
We don't want your due diligence money to be gone unless there's a good reason for it. And we don't want you to miss the chance to get in the market. And that's why it's important to understand all these factors. But frankly, all these things that I'm saying, any experienced agent that I know, and I have the best Rolodex of pros on the planet, we know all of these things and we'll guide you through it. So maybe when you're interviewing an agent to help you buy or to help you sell, find out if they know as much as you now do from watching this video. I can tell you that if you call Linda Craft, she'll know this times 25, because this is what she's done forever. And so she's going to be able to layer in all the things that have happened and changed in this local market. Why would you hire somebody that doesn't even know the bare basics of what's changing, how we got here, and what it means to you? This is the moment, frankly, that I've been waiting for. And maybe finally buyers and sellers will do a better job interviewing their representation.
Absolutely.
It's driven me crazy for years how many people will just use their brother-in-law because he got his license last week.
Right.
He might be a nice guy. He has not the foggiest idea of what you're about to tread into. And by the same token, there are agents that have been in the business for 50 years and they've sold one house every other year like clockwork. They're also not up to speed. You, the buyers and sellers, have got to be asking your agents if they are worth what they're charging. And I just don't think we'd be in this situation if more consumers had been more discerning in their choices.
I agree. I totally agree. I think I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a menu.
And that's fine. It's a good thing.
Which I think is probably pretty good, but I think it's going to be a menu. I think you're going to have what will this person do? And I think they're going to pick off of a menu what they want, right? They're going to check the box. And I think that's probably what they're going to pay for. I may be wrong on this, but it'll
be one of the business models that crops up.
I think it's,
we'll see
I think it has, I think it's going to have to be a business model where you pick and choose what services you want. By the way, you do not want to open the door of a house without an agent. You just don't want to do that. Do not do that. It's not in your best interest to do that. You don't know what you're looking at. You don't know for sure what you're looking for. You don't know what the possibilities are. You've never probably negotiated an inspection before. And if you have never ever negotiated an inspection before, you don't want to do that. You want to be a professional that does that. And we didn't even get into inspections. We're just saying that as a result of this NAR settlement, you need to be more diligent now than you have ever had to be in the past. You just do, because you're going to want to look out for people who are going to look out for you and negotiate on your behalf, because you don't want to negotiate for yourself. Did I do that okay?
Absolutely.
Right.
Because we could spend 3 hours talking about the inspection process.
Right.
Which, funny enough, is not even part of the discussion coming from the lawsuits or the DOJ. But can you only imagine how many lawyers are licking their chops right now over the buyers that won't have an agent because they were told they didn't need one?
Right.
And then you don't get to sue the DOJ, friends.
Right.
You don't.
You don't.
So you'll listen to them. You won't have an agent. You won't do an inspection because you'll think, I got Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob can look at the house for me.
Right.
Be very cognizant of the fact that unless Uncle Bob is a licensed home inspector, he might not know all the things to watch for. So these buyers are going to get down the road. They'll have foregone inspections. They'll have foregone representation and agents. They're going to be very upset when they find out that they weren't treated well because they had nobody to advocate for them. I mean, you see it in the healthcare system. I've watched it right now. My uncle, who's 96, he's a Korean War vet.
Wow.
Stroked out while he was driving and flew off a 10-foot drop off a bridge. Airbags didn't even go off. The Lord was watching him. He's fine. My aunt's fine. So because this man has no issues, but he can't hear, the doctors and nurses didn't know what to do with him until we got a patient advocate in the room with him to make sure that he could understand what was going on, because at 96, you can't hear. I love that patient advocate. Without one, he wouldn't have any idea what was going on. He'd have no way to explain what he feels and what he knows. That's what your realtor does. Your realtor is a consumer advocate. Maybe we need to be positioning ourselves differently too when it comes to the fact that we stand in the gap. We stand in the gap between the other side and you. And the other side might be honorable. So please don't think I'm saying that real estate is always cutthroat and fisticuffs. It's not, but two parties have different end goals. The seller wants the most for the house. The buyer wants the least for the house. The seller wants to skim out of repairs. Buyers want it done to the tippy-top best level. The advocates in the middle, the seller's agent, the buyer's agent, are the messengers who pull that through. And you have to understand that.
Do you have some more time?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to.
Smokey didn't comment again, though. So
I don't know where Smokey is, but he's giving us hearts early on this morning before the show started. Let's go to the seller side, because
congratulations. The headline said you don't have to pay anybody anymore. Ta-da! Everybody's working for free. This is obviously utopia.
Let's go to the seller side of this. What does this settlement now mean really for the seller side?
Well, in North Carolina, our paperwork for years and years, 30 years, has said if you're paying X dollars to your agent is then going to talk to you about how much of all of those X dollars are going to go to the agent for the other side. So when I said it was baked in, the seller paid a total to their agent, and their agent then split theirs with the agent representing the buyer. Sometimes half and half, sometimes 60-40, and just all over the place. You've seen lots and lots of numbers. And from my experience, sellers really have never cared what happens with the agent's money. They have a total in mind. They're cool with it. How y'all want to deal with it is how y'all deal with it. It's like children in the back seat who are splitting a candy bar. And some children in the back seat are going to measure that candy bar and slice it exactly in the middle because they want their half to be precise. And then otherwise, it's hot, it's melting. Let's just divvy it up. One side cares, one doesn't care. But all mom and dad know is there was one candy bar, and that's what you're dealing with. That's how it's always worked. The change for sellers now is that if you're paying your agent and your agent is not allowed to compensate the buyer's broker, because that's what's coming. The current iteration is you can, but you got to do it under the table and secretly, which never a good idea. Introducing more opacity into the market, not my favorite.
Lack of transparency.
Yeah, so now we can sneaky offer it in emails, but not in the multiple listing, which is our data set. Great. But the goal is to get rid of that and say the seller can't compensate the buyer's agent. The way that I look at it is if a seller is taking that total and part of that total goes to the agent for the buyer, all you're doing is increasing your buyer pool. Because if you're selling your house and you want to get the best offer possible, you want the biggest audience possible. You want as many buyers as possible, know about your house, so we can find the one over here, the one over here. And when you figure that out, your house might be really attractive to somebody who doesn't have a huge amount of cash on hand. They are highly qualified for their mortgage. They are good buyers, but they just don't have a lot of liquid cash, which is the bulk of the public. So as a seller, you can say, you know what? I still want to offer that compensation because I want to reach the buyer who needs me to cover it. This is what we talked about before, where as a buyer, you can pay direct or have the seller cover. We want sellers to have that option. And so when you're thinking about this, sellers, it's really a marketing fee. Are you willing to pay a marketing fee to reach more buyers? You might get a buyer that doesn't need it. That's okay. But you might get a buyer that does. All we ask is that you be open to the conversation because we want you to get the best possible offer for your house. We also want you to reach buyer groups that may not have access to your house before. I personally am very worried about discrimination re-entering the market because of the funds going away.
Sure. And
when we will know what I mean by that, if you take away transparency, and now I know that my seller is willing to cover a buyer fee, but I can't publish that. Okay, so what if I have a cold heart, sinful nature, black-mindedness, just ugly like the Grinch heart, just terrible. And then you call me and I say, well, yeah, I like you. I'll pay your agent. And then some agent calls me that I don't like. It's like, not yours. You'll never have a way to track that. It bothers me immensely that there won't be a way to know if one agent or one seller are only offering compensation to certain people or certain people groups or even certain brands, because we've always had a problem in real estate with brand boycotts because it's very competitive business. All of those things are risks to you, the buyer, that you don't know about, and risks to you, the seller, that you won't know about because we're removing that transparency from the market. So long story short, as a seller, when your agent talks to you about what's changing, a good agent's going to say, you have this option. Let me know if you'd like to pursue it. And your agent might say, no, don't do it. Never pay a buyer's agent. That agent is telling you to shrink your buyer market. I'd be very hesitant to listen to somebody who tells you to shrink your buyer market. Unless they're just panicked about getting sued by the DOJ, in which case you should probably ask more questions.
Well, there's some issues with all of this, right? Because there's an attorney that's out there right now who is threatening,
making bank.
Yeah, who's threatening, saying, well, if you are representing a buyer and we find out that you didn't show a house that wasn't offering a commission, that they're going to go after that buyer's agent. My question is, if that buyer doesn't have any money and says to you as the agent, I don't have any money to pay you, so I really can only look at houses that offer a commission. Now what?
Repeat after me. Good to be a North Carolina realtor, because North Carolina, our forms are jointly approved by the North Carolina Bar Association and the North Carolina Realtors. So we do a lot of legal work in advance to make sure that we're protecting the public and that we're educating our agents. So in our updated forms, it allows the buyer to say, I only want to look at houses where my agent can be compensated. So the buyer does have that option. What these lawyers are looking for are people who don't fill the forms out correctly. So take as many classes as you can. If you're a realtor, get yourself really educated on this. If you're a consumer, make sure you've got an agent who's really educated on this. But also just be aware of this, because your agent shouldn't have to work for free. In fact, one of the arguments from the DOJ has been agents should be willing to work pro bono. All right, I do some pro bono work in my life. I think any experienced professional does. But don't tell me I have to work for free. What other profession is being told by the highest levels of government that we should work for free? That's absolutely crazy. And I'm just going to point out, you get what you pay for. Now, if somebody decides they're going to work for less because there's a special situation, that can happen. But it shouldn't be a business model. It just doesn't make sense that we're actively telling agents they don't deserve to be compensated when they're professionals. And we're hearing this from the federal government, which shouldn't have any stake in a local business, because all real estate is local, tiny business, micro entrepreneurs. It's one person who decided to strike out, build some relationships, and guide people in their biggest transaction. Why we're a target is pretty astonishing.
It is pretty astonishing, because you're almost trying to kick us back to the dark ages of real estate. Well, there was a dark era of real estate,
and it's why we fixed it all these years. Realtors built a multiple listing service that would eliminate the boycotts and the discrimination, and would build universal compensation so that it would be fair and accessible to as much of the public as possible. It's been great. But then you read all these articles, Jay. It's kind of crazy when you watch the talking points go out to the media, because the articles are all the same headlines and the same information. And they call Generation X, not Generation X, we never get mentioned, the millennials and the Generation Zs, the Zoomers, they call them a generation of renters. They tell them, you'll never buy, you're never going to own, home ownership is out of reach. Don't listen to that. They're trying to build in a mindset that says you may as well rent, and then they're going to break our very efficient, transparent system so they can say we're the bad guys. We're not the bad guys. We haven't been. We have worked our tails off for fair housing. We have worked our tails off for our communities. In fact, you'd be hard pressed to show me a realtor that's not out there volunteering all the time, just trying to make people's lives better. What we've done in every stretch of our business and in this profession over decades and decades, how do we get more people introduced to home ownership? How do we create more creative ways? Teach people about duplexes, and you could buy one side and rent the other out. And if you're a first timer, hello, that's what you should do every single time. You start thinking about what we've done in our communities. I love who realtors are, and I love what we've done, and I love what home ownership in America has done for the public, because it's their one safety net on retirement is the house. In fact, I'll give the stat that is the most striking. So if you're thinking about buying, you need to know this stat. And this is big data set, so over decades and decades. And this comes from the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, Dr. Lawrence Yun. And it's just shocking. The average renter who's rented their whole lifetime, and it's a lot of our neighbors, they don't come from a history of home ownership. Nobody showed them the way. They never met the realtor who would hold their hand. They rent their whole lives. At retirement age, they have $6,000 in savings. That's it. Now you ask yourself, well, why don't renters save? Well, rents go up every year. And maybe they go flat 2 years, but then they keep going up. You cannot outpace rent. And the American public's just not good at saving anyway. We are spenders. We are consumers by nature. So there's no forced savings model. The average homeowner, when you get to that same age of retirement, has $300,000 in savings. And of course, it's primarily in the form of the equity in their home, but that equity can be tapped in the form of a reverse mortgage or a home equity line. You've got a payment that can be counted on. So if you ever wondered why housing is better than renting, rent is a stair step up. That 30-year fixed mortgage, which is pretty unique to the US, there's only 2 other countries that have it, keeps housing affordable. So now your payment is fairly stable over 30 years, except for taxes and insurance. But overall, you've got a number you can count on. And in an inflationary period, that has changed people's lives, that they can stay in their house while their neighbors had to change rentals because the rental just got out of reach. So you start realizing that there's a long-term huge benefit to being a homeowner. And if the messaging right now is telling people don't bother, we're setting up 20 and 30 years down the road for a very impoverished retirement age generation. And Social Security is a Ponzi scheme that will barely be around for us if we have anything, but for the millennials and Zoomers, you can't borrow against it that long. I mean, the national debt is $100,000 per American today, and it's going up $1 trillion every 90 days. We have a massive problem on our hands. And how do you manage that storm? By being a homeowner, because you can at least count on your house payment.
I think I think the really huge point here is who is advocating for you to purchase a home?
Realtors.
Right. If you're Gen Z or millennial, who is advocating for you to purchase a home? Who is trying to help you purchase a home?
It's the realtors.
It's not the DOJ, by the way. By the way, it's not.
And it's none of the class action lawyers either.
And it's not the class action lawyers either. So there's only one group who's advocating to say, we want you to have a home.
Yes.
We want you to build wealth. We want you to be able to retire. We don't want you to be faced with rents that are increasing and escalating at all-time highs that you can't. No, we'd like to stabilize your payment, right?
The hedge against inflation is what that is. The hedge.
Buy the house, date the rate, and when you can, refinance, right? Lower it down.
And then keep it. Please don't sell it.
Don't sell it.
Who else tells you that but realtors?
Right.
Which goes against our own self-interest.
Right.
To say, if there's a way for you to keep this as a rental, build a rental portfolio.
Right.
We love it when our clients build a long-term portfolio strategy.
Right.
And to your point, it's only the local realtor. It's not even the big associations. They're worried about a lot of different things, but it's your local friend who's in real estate who says, I can help you.
Well, let's figure it out. Right? Let's
make a plan.
Let's at least figure it out. Okay, maybe you can't buy today. Let's come up with a plan that maybe we can buy tomorrow.
Probably have these local lenders, because if you're using a website that says you're not approved, they're not going to hold your hand and say, well, actually, you have zero credit because you follow Dave Ramsey to the T. So you have no credit score. So let's get a Target card and make a little bit of a purchase and make a little payment so we can build you up. Local lenders do that with local realtors to help local neighbors buy their first house, which is usually the cheapest thing that realtor will ever sell. So they're not making a bathtub full of Scrooge McDuck money.
Right.
But if you talk to any realtor, they'll tell you their favorite closings all day long are those inexpensive first-time buyers who have tears coming down their face at closing because the keys are finally mine. Yeah. And the realtor will tell you, that's my favorites all day long. It's never the luxury people.
It's not.
They're great though. We love our luxury.
No, we
people,
do. But you're right, because, and so many of your local lenders, by the way, have programs now that will help you recover from bad credit.
Not the credit repair companies, by the way. Be very cautious because those are a lot of them scams. But the local lender relationship says, let's take a look at this and make a plan. And
it's amazing.
So good.
It's so good, right, for them. And you're right. When you see somebody who works so hard to recover their credit,
it feels so good.
And then you're at the attorney's office and those keys slide over. Is there anything better than that?
Everybody cries. Everybody cheers. It's the best feeling ever. They bring us presents.
Yeah.
It's the most hilarious thing in the world. We have our clients that they're paying us and they bring us presents to thank us. And these local lenders, I mean, when you watch their joy in helping somebody else get their credit score up 20 points, it's not about the loan fees. It's about, we know that person now has changed their future trajectory forever.
Yeah.
They have changed everything for their family future. When you look at those two data points on what happens at retirement, we in real estate know that the house is how you change the entire pathway. Right. And we keep fighting for that. Yeah. And it's good. It's a good fight.
Yeah. So maybe, and you know, I'm well educated and taught in colleges and universities, right? So maybe the answer is not education, it's buying a house.
Well, we should probably burn down the universities to start with, because I don't know that you can fix them at this point, except for High Point. It's great. Liberty's wonderful. I have questions. I have lots of questions. But yes, I've told my kids that.
Right.
The money we saved for college, you could use that as a down payment if you would prefer, because that's actually going to have at this point in time, a different outcome than if you think about what's going on with the amount of student debt that's necessary now, because Carolina is way too expensive for what it is, especially when I know what the size of their endowment is. I have lots of questions.
Right.
But in reality, that house, well, my son turns 18 on Sunday. He already owns a house.
Good for him.
We took his savings and he bought a little house, and he decided where he wanted it to be. It's a little brick ranch in Concord, and it's rented out. He's watching every month to watch the rents come in. And he's interested in what this means for him. He could live there one day, but regardless, he has a an income stream.
Right.
My daughter's 19. She owns a house. Because what we've done as parents is say, look, your savings will work as well in tangible assets as in the stock markets, which I am concerned about right now.
Yeah.
I don't get concerned about real estate.
Nope.
It might be a slower and steadier pace to the future, but I'm okay with slow and steady.
Yeah. Yeah, I sure am. This has been awesome. And you've been fabulous. As always.
I enjoyed the conversation.
So would you do me a favor? Would you tell people out there how they can get a hold of Leigh Brown, whether it is to speak, sign a book, or you know what, just do real estate with me?
Well, first of all, you can always call Linda Craft's office because Linda has my cell phone. So you can connect through realtors. Never fear, because we talk to each other all the time. And I say that kind of in jest, but it's very true that one of the reasons I've known Linda for so long is that she's one of the queens of the Raleigh real estate market. And we have had clients that have gone back and forth between Charlotte and Raleigh. So I can attest to the level of professionalism here. That's a really big deal to the consumer. But for the rest of my stuff, you can go to leighbrown.com and you can see my name somewhere in the caption for this.
Yeah.
And I've got all of my stuff is there, and you can find me on social media and you can ask me a question, and you can come buy property in Cabarrus County, which is 1B and 2Rs. And most importantly, if you know somebody that's in real estate, if you're a consumer, talk to your real estate friends. Make sure they're watching episodes like this so that they can be a better professional for you in the future. Even if you don't need them now, tell your realtors to get up to speed so that they'll be in business when you need them. I am concerned that we'll have some great agents that will throw their hands up and say, this is too much. I can't deal with this. We need really great agents in every marketplace to take care of you, the consumer. So help us keep your agent in the business and tune them into this show so that they can become better for you.
Thank you for doing that. And by the way, we're going to have a blog
and
post.
It's true.
We're going to have a blog post associated with this. You go to realestaterightnowshow.com and it'll have Leigh's information right there. So you could click on it and be really easy to get a hold of her. I think we're going to even include all her social media. I think we should just do that because I think it's just the right thing to do.
We're here to make life easy.
I would like to do that. Thank you for doing this. Folks, it's the show. You know what I say to you every week. You know what? You had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you for doing that. You know what? Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, and wherever you're listening to the show on podcast, give us a positive review. We really appreciate it.
Excuse me, Jay. Excuse me. We don't ask for positive reviews. We ask for 5-star reviews. Please give 5 stars. We are very specific in our metrics. We want 5 stars and hit the bell. I didn't say 5-star. I always say 5-star. And for whatever reason, I didn't say 5-star. Positive is too generic. We don't do generic
5-star review. iTunes, 5-star review. Write something. Spotify, 5-star review. I know you can't write anything. iHeartRadio, 5-star review. That's what we're asking for. All right. You know what? This is the show. We thank you so much. And as I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.
By the way, friends, don't miss my brand new coaching program at answers.realestate, where you can have access to Leigh Brown, submit your questions, have them answered, meet like-minded professionals, have an entire library to help you build your business no matter what happens in the market. Get signed up today. I promise you'll be glad you did. So if you found value in this episode, please like and subscribe to this channel, turn on the bell, and catch another amazing episode by clicking above. Crazy Shit in Real Estate is also available on all of your normal podcast apps. So if that's where you like to hang out, go find me, click subscribe, and most importantly, leave me a review that says you think I'm awesome, my guests are awesome, or this content is just exactly what you were looking for. And then, by the way, if there's something you need, you want to learn about something, you can comment below anytime. You can also send me a direct message if you need to remain anonymous. No judgment. But anyway, I'll only judge if you forget to subscribe and click. I'll see you next time.